Political parties often tell us that they stand for something bigger than just winning elections: ideologies, values, and beliefs that guide their every decision. But here's the shocking truth: most of them don't really care about ideology at all. In fact, only 22% of Americans strongly identify with a political party's ideology, according to a 2021 Pew Research study. This means that the majority of voters are either disconnected or don't trust the ideological promises made by political parties. But why does this happen? How do parties shift and change their messages without any real commitment to the beliefs they promote? The answer lies in power, and the game of politics is far more strategic than it seems. Political ideologies are often used as tools, manipulated to win votes, secure donations, and hold on to control. It's a game, and the rules aren't about staying true to beliefs, they're about adapting, compromising, and even abandoning principles to stay in the driver's seat. In this video, we'll dive deep into why political parties seem to care less about their ideologies and more about winning the game. We'll reveal how strategies like emotional manipulation, power plays, and money influence everything. From how parties shift their ideologies like chameleons to how they manipulate voters with emotional tactics, we'll uncover the truth behind the curtains. Stick with us. This might change the way you think about politics forever. Chapter 1: The Ideology Mirage, a strategic illusion. Political parties often present themselves as ideologically driven institutions, claiming to stand for something bigger than just power. However, when you peel back the curtain, you find that ideology often serves as little more than a facade. Think about it. When was the last time you heard a politician say they were willing to sacrifice their pursuit of power for the sake of ideology? Rarely. Instead, political ideologies are used strategically to appeal to voters, not as guiding principles for actual policy. In reality, political parties shift and evolve their positions depending on what helps them win elections. For example, in the 2016 US election, many politicians who once supported free trade shifted to protectionist stances when they saw the rise of populism. In other words, ideology is not a constant but a tool for manipulation. It is molded and adjusted like clay to fit the needs of the party. Even the way parties frame their ideologies is part of the game. Take the concept of wedge issues, topics that divide the opposition but unify the party base. Issues like abortion, gun control, and climate change are often emphasized not because they are deeply rooted in the party's ideology, but because they provoke strong emotional reactions. The truth is that ideological purity is secondary to electoral victory. After all, parties must appeal to as many voters as possible, so they adapt their ideologies based on shifting public opinions. A 2018 Gallup poll revealed that 52% of Americans identified as political independents, highlighting the growing disconnection between traditional political ideologies and voter loyalty. In this environment, political parties are constantly adjusting their platforms to chase the votes of the undecided. Even historical examples show how ideology is flexible. Consider Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal. Despite being a staunch progressive, Roosevelt embraced large-scale government intervention, going against traditional democratic views of a limited government. In a 1932 speech, Roosevelt said, "The country needs an, unless I mistake its temper, the country demands bold, persistent experimentation." Ideology, it seemed, was an afterthought to his willingness to try whatever was necessary to restore the economy. Political parties have also mastered the art of catch-all strategies, meaning they adapt to attract a broader base by blending elements from opposing ideologies. A study from Harvard's Institute of Politics found that in recent years, both Republicans and Democrats have increasingly embraced more centrist policies, blurring the lines that once separated them. The point here is that political ideology isn't about principle, it's about finding the right mix of ideas to win over key demographic groups. Chapter 2: The Power Play. Ideology as a tool, not a guide. When it comes to political strategy, power is the ultimate currency. And ideology? Well, it's just one of many tools that help parties navigate the game. The truth is that the pursuit of power often trumps any ideological commitment. In fact, ideological shifts have been a constant feature of the political landscape. Think about the Democratic Party's transformation from the Party of the South to the progressive platform it is today. The key to this shift? Political power. Parties constantly adjust their ideological positions to align with changing voter sentiments. For example, in 1992, Bill Clinton famously rebranded the Democratic Party as the New Democrats, moving away from the traditional left-wing policies of the past. Clinton's economic policies, which embraced fiscal conservatism, were in stark contrast to the liberal welfare programs championed by previous Democratic leaders. This shift was a calculated move to win over moderates and independents, crucial swing voters. Political power also means making tough decisions, like compromising your beliefs to form coalitions. In many parliamentary systems, parties must create alliances with others to form a governing majority. These compromises often mean bending or even abandoning certain ideological stances. This is especially true in coalition governments, where parties frequently agree on policies based on what is necessary to stay in power. It's not about sticking to a rigid ideology, it's about negotiating for the most advantageous deal. Moreover, ideologies are often diluted or manipulated to maintain a tight grip on power. Take, for example, the Republican Party's pivot on healthcare. While the GOP has long been associated with limited government intervention, during the Obama administration, the party adopted an aggressive stance against the Affordable Care Act. Yet, after the election of Donald Trump, Republican rhetoric around healthcare softened as the party sought to appeal to voters in swing states who were dependent on ACA provisions. This isn't to say that ideology is completely irrelevant, it still serves as a useful bargaining chip. Politicians often use ideological promises to rally their base and present themselves as true believers. But once they're in power, it's a different story. In 2017, Mitch McConnell, then Senate Majority Leader, famously said, "The one thing we know is that the Republican Party is the party of no." What he meant wasn't a rejection of ideology, but a recognition that ideological purity often takes a backseat when you're busy managing the complexities of governance. Ideological flexibility, then, is not a flaw, but a feature of a well-oiled political machine. It's not about sticking to principles, it's about knowing when to compromise for the sake of control. Chapter 3, The Money Behind the Party, Ideology versus Influence. Money plays a massive role in shaping political agendas, often pushing ideology aside in favor of financial backing. Political parties may espouse certain ideologies, but it's corporate donations, lobbyists, and influential interest groups that truly steer their policies. A 2018 report by the Center for Responsive Politics found that nearly 75% of all federal election spending comes from corporate PACs and wealthy donors. This means that the interests of the rich and powerful often shape policy more than any ideological framework. Take the influence of the fossil fuel industry on climate change policy. Despite a growing body of evidence supporting the urgency of addressing climate change, both Republican and Democratic parties have often downplayed environmental concerns to maintain their relationships with energy giants like ExxonMobil and Chevron. For example, during the 2020 Democratic primaries, Joe Biden, while advocating for climate action, faced backlash from environmental groups for his support of fracking, an industry that is heavily funded by oil and gas corporations. But the role of money isn't just about direct financial contributions, it's also about the revolving door between government and industry. Former government officials frequently go on to take lucrative jobs with the same industries they once regulated. This cycle of influence has created a political environment where parties cater to corporate interests, not their ideological base. Politicians, especially in competitive races, are keenly aware of the financial costs of elections. A study by the Brennan Center for Justice found that in 2020, the cost of a House race averaged $1.6 million. This means that candidates must rely heavily on campaign contributions to compete, leading them to make policy decisions that align with the preferences of their financial backers. What's more, wealthy donors and lobbyists have the resources to create and fund think tanks, academic studies, and political ads that influence public opinion and shape party platforms. In some cases, ideologies are crafted and marketed based on the needs of those with the deepest pockets. This creates a feedback loop where ideology is tailored to suit the interests of the wealthy elite. Ultimately, political ideology is often secondary to the practical reality of fundraising and securing the financial resources necessary to run successful campaigns. In this way, money becomes a major driver of political strategy, pushing ideologies to the sidelines in favor of maintaining influence and power. If you're enjoying this content so far, make sure to hit the subscribe button and stay updated for more insights into the world of politics. Chapter 4, The Voter Puppet Show, Manipulating Ideology for Votes. Political parties often treat ideologies like a puppet show, carefully crafted and strategically performed to manipulate voters. The key here is emotional appeal. Politicians understand that voters are often driven more by their emotions than by a clear understanding of complex political ideologies. To sway public opinion, parties hone in on issues that spark strong feelings, whether it's fear, anger, or hope. Take, for instance, the way the Republican Party capitalized on fears about immigration during the 2016 election cycle. Immigration became the central issue, despite the fact that the actual policy proposals on immigration were vague or contradictory. The goal was not necessarily to implement radical change but to energize their base by making a simple, emotional appeal. Similarly, the Democratic Party's focus on healthcare reform during the 2008 election was designed to galvanize voters who were angry about rising medical costs and a broken system. Both sides knew that connecting emotionally with the electorate could secure votes, regardless of whether their ideological promises were fully realized in policy. One technique commonly used by political parties is the creation of fear narratives. These narratives, often based on exaggerated or distorted facts, are designed to make voters believe that without the party's intervention, society will face catastrophic consequences. The rise of fake news and misinformation campaigns has made this even easier to accomplish. Studies have shown that voters who consume more partisan media are more likely to be swayed by these emotional narratives. But ideology plays a role in these manipulations too. Political parties select certain ideologies and frame them in ways that fit the current narrative. For example, the concept of national security is often manipulated to justify increased government surveillance or military spending. In reality, these policies don't always align with the party's ideological beliefs, but they play well with voters who prioritize safety and security. This isn't just limited to national politics. On a local level, political parties often target specific voter groups with tailored ideological messages that resonate with their unique concerns. In swing states, for instance, both parties often shift their ideological stances based on local issues, even if those issues have little to do with their national platforms. A study by Pew Research in 2020 found that 67% of voters in swing states felt their votes mattered more in the general election than in the primary, which highlights how politicians tweak their ideologies depending on the electoral context. Don't forget to subscribe and stay with us for more real talk about how politics really work. Chapter 5, The Chameleon Strategy, Shifting Ideology for the Win. Political parties are the masters of adaptation, often changing their ideological colors to suit the political climate. Just like a chameleon adjusting to its surroundings, political parties shift their positions to maintain relevance in a fast-changing world. What seemed like an unshakable ideological stance one year might become a liability the next. A classic example of this is the 1980s shift of the Democratic Party toward the center under Bill Clinton. Once known for its left-leaning economic policies, Clinton moved the party toward more conservative fiscal stances with his third way approach, which prioritized a mix of free market principles and social welfare programs. This chameleon-like adaptability has become even more pronounced in the age of social media. Politicians today must adjust their messages almost daily to stay in tune with public opinion. Take, for example, the shift in the Republican Party's stance on trade. In the past, the GOP championed free trade and globalization. Yet, during the 2016 election, Donald Trump's populist message about the dangers of unchecked trade resonated with working-class voters, causing many Republicans to adopt more protectionist views, even though these views had previously been considered outside the party's ideological core. This shift in party ideology often isn't just about gaining votes, it's about survival. As voter demographics change, parties are forced to reconsider their ideological stances to remain competitive. A Pew Research study from 2020 revealed that 56% of voters aged 18–29 identified as Democrats, a significant jump from previous generations. This shift in demographics forced the Democratic Party to adapt its platform on issues like climate change, student debt, and healthcare to appeal to younger voters. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and stick around as we dive deeper into political strategies. Chapter 6, From Ideology to Identity, the real driver of political loyalty in today's political landscape. Identity has become just as important, if not more important, than ideology in driving party loyalty. Voters are no longer just aligning themselves with a set of policies, they are aligning with a group that reflects their personal identity. This shift has been particularly pronounced in the United States, where partisan identity has become deeply intertwined with cultural and social values. This is clear when you examine how polarized US politics has become. A 2020 Gallup poll revealed that 92% of Republicans and 94% of Democrats felt that their party's positions were closer to their personal values than to the other parties. This shows that party loyalty is now more about a sense of belonging than about ideological agreement. Whether it's through shared religious values, cultural outlook, or even social media networks, voters are increasingly identifying with a party because it aligns with their personal worldview, not necessarily because they fully agree with the party's platform. This transformation in voter loyalty has made it harder for parties to stay ideologically consistent. As parties become more aligned with identity, their platforms become more about performing and reinforcing that identity rather than pushing specific policies. For example, during the 2016 US presidential election, Donald Trump didn't just run on a conservative platform, he ran as a symbol of a cultural identity that resonated with many voters who felt marginalized in the evolving social landscape. His campaign wasn't just about conservative policies, it was about telling voters, you are part of something important. Identity politics are now a dominant force in both major US parties, with each side emphasizing issues that reflect the values of their core supporters. The Democratic Party, for example, has increasingly emphasized social justice issues, while the Republican Party has aligned itself with traditional conservative values. This shift towards identity has led to increasing polarization, as voters now see their political party as a representation of their personal beliefs, values, and group affiliations. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden truths of political strategies.